Here is the black and bruised booby flies. You can see that they want to naturally float back up to the top. So when the water gets a little bouncy, they're going to help drag the other flies back up to the surface, especially when you put them on point on the end of your leader or tippet. Booby flies are perfect for a washing line setup for that reason. Today we're going to tie the black and bruised booby fly. Here's the hook. We're using hen's booby eyes, and there's the size because it'll make the fly float. 6904 Flashabou. The thread. Dress the hook. Tie in some black marabou. No more than 1.5 times the length of the hook. Make sure it's blended around the hook so it doesn't try to twist on you. Tie in your wire and Flashabou. Let's get that piece of Flashabou tied onto there. We'll do a couple of strands of that. Add a little whip finish just to kind of keep this thing put together. Now we're going to tie in a dubbing loop, and we'll just wrap it there, and then I'll scoot it back towards the end of the fly there and make sure and come around the back side so that it can't skip up to the front, and just run some figure eights around it. Now that my dubbing loop's complete, I'm going to put my dubbing loop twister in there and just let it sit on that set screw for just a sec. One more whip finish on the end, and we're going to hang that string on that spindle holder over there. We're going to use the black and bruised and pull it apart until we can get it nice and stacked straight. About this much. It's time to twist that dubbing loop now that we've got it all positioned in there. Just keep twisting it up. Now we're just going to start twisting that dubbing loop up and kind of keep pulling the fibers back. Don't let them fold down in like that. And that way it'll build up a nice, real buggy fly for you. I like to just keep kind of pulling them back as I go. And just take my time while I'm doing this part of it. At this point, you want to make sure that you always pull the thread behind your dubbing loop and in front. Kind of run some figure eights around that, make sure it gets nice and tight in. And then you can pull that dubbing loop back and add a few extra twists over it to build that head out. Next, we'll cut that out. Now we're at the point on this fly, it's time to wrap the wire. So I like to get all my semi-seal kind of brushed out that way. That way when I pull this wire through here, it's a little bit easier to see what's going on. We'll kind of try to bring it up through here a little bit. I want to make sure and keep the fibers kind of parallel with it so it doesn't pull too much of it down. And we want to try to just do 4 wraps on the way up to the front end of this fly. And just keep pulling some of that semi-seal out of the way as we wrap up there. Make sure that you can kind of separate any of these clumps so that you can get the wire to basically pass through them without dragging it underneath. And that's what's going to keep that hackle look going for you. Then just go ahead and tie off that wire. Get some wraps in front of it and back behind it and cut it off. I'm going to add a couple more whip finishes here before I start to helicopter that thing. Let's see if we can get it to just twist off there. Hold the fly steady. Perfect. So now we're going to just start combing some of this back. See if we can get it to kind of lay down a little bit flatter. That's going to help it when it's undulating through the water and give it that breathability. Almost done. Just need to cut some of that Flashabou back there and then tie on the booby eyes. By the way, you could fish this fly just as is. It's you pull that along on an intermediate line, you're probably a type 1. I think it'd do really well. Now for the booby eye, I don't worry about getting it perfect because I know that I'm going to actually cut it right when I get it on the fly so I can center it. And what you're going to want to do is kind of wrap it on there until it gets kind of tight. Oh, my wrap came undone. I'm going to have to redo that. Alright, I've redone my wrap around there. We'll just keep bringing it in. We want it to reside up here on the top of the fly. And once we get it into position, we're just going to come back here and pull some figure eights around it. Come around there. And just kind of just keep working those eyeballs in until it comes time to trim them up. And you can finish the whip finish in front of this or behind it. I've chosen to whip finish behind the eyes on this one. I think it's a personal preference. As long as you got a bunch of wraps before you start the whip finish back here, I think it works out just fine. Helps to kind of build that neck up a little bit too, and you can kind of decide how thick you want that neck to be. But I'd say at least 3 whip finishes with 3 wraps on each should suffice. And there's your finished fly. I just need to trim up the eyes. So I like to do them in 4 quadrants, so I'll just kind of do an angle there, angle there, angle there, and an angle there. And then I may take a little bit of a lighter to that. I don't have a perfect method for making the eyes round, but you can just kind of work it in and play around with that a little bit. And there's the black and bruised booby fly.